In fact, this is a question that my wife told me I needed to ask, was because she often thinks, she says, I see people going around drinking Dr. Pepper and Coke and stuff, and when she smells the smell of coffee, she's like, I wish I could have that. And she told me I needed to ask about coffee and tea and why that is involved when perhaps other things aren't explicitly mentioned, that people, with going to McDonald's all the time and things like that.
Yeah.
What we often like to do when we get into these kind of texts, whether it's Doctrine and Covenants, the Book of Mormon, the Bible, any kind of older text, we like to go back to what the words meant at the time to try and understand what was trying to be conveyed. And what's interesting about the word hot in reference to hot drinks is there's many definitions in the 1800s. It could mean temperature hot, but there's also another definition meaning hot as in stimulating. So any kind of stimulating drink. That could be one interpretation, that any kind of drink that's going to stimulate your body in an unnatural way is going to do some harm. And so therefore we should avoid those kinds of things. So things like energy drinks, in my opinion, those are way more stimulating than coffee and tea, especially today. And I think that kind of goes into the conspiring men at the very beginning of the Word of Wisdom. It says that I give you these things because of the plans that will exist in the hearts of conspiring men. I think things like energy drinks and the overloaded sugary sodas, those are all things that are really stimulating, and they wear down the body. And so I think that's the reason why there's that admonition to avoid those kind of hot drinks. At the time, coffee and tea were really the only things that were those kind of stimulating drinks.
And one of the things that's been interesting for us is throughout the years, God has changed our hearts so much, and we've learned so much about grace. I feel like since we wwrote the book, we've changed a lot in that regard. And we'll write another book sometime soon. I think sometimes
Please do.
We're legalist in our view. But one of the things that I think we've really come to understand and see is that God is calling different people to different things. There's some people who may not be ready or want to give up meat or stimulating drinks or really anything for that matter. And there's other people who are hungry looking for more. And so God is calling us each individually to get better where we're at.
Line upon line.
And to do what we're prepared to do at that time. For some people, it makes sense. And if I could admonish anyone from my perspective as a PhD in nutrition, stay away from any of those, sodas, all of those drinks. Even a lot of the juices you find in the grocery store are just junk, right? It's not even real juice. All of these things will never add to your health. They don't even add to your long-term energy. They crash you in the day, and so all of these things, including the teas, the black teas and the coffees, have health implications, short-term and long-term. We've worked with so many people who have PCOS or hormone problems, who won't get off, who have the caffeine. We're having a cup of even organic, good quality coffee every morning, and it's disrupting their hormones. So we know that there's serious problems associated with all of these drinks. And that's not the question. We all kind of know that. Nobody's drinking a Monster energy drink thinking, I think this is good for me, right? Like, this has good protein. But so we naturally know that. But at the same time, we may not be ready to give it up. If God's calling somebody, if you feel convicted by it, please give it up. It definitely fits in that category. It's going to affect your spirit and your mind every single time you partake. And so rather than, I think it's easy for us to look around and judge what other people are doing or aren't doing. People, who chug Monster energy drinks are allowed in the temple, and maybe somebody else who has coffee isn't. And sometimes that can feel unfair. I don't think any of that is for us to judge or look at. I think for us, it's to look at our own heart and what is God calling us to do. For Jordan and I, we eat way different than anybody else. We don't require anybody else to eat the way that we do, right? We eat very, very different. Our kids have never had sugar before. Our kids have never had processed food before. And that's not what everyone else is. That's not what God's calling everyone else to do. But that's what he's calling us to do. And so I think sometimes part of it is doing the best we can to be in tune with the Spirit, to know what we should do, where we should be called. And then we can control that. We can control us and our family, right? We can choose to not partake of the Dr. Pepper or whatever, but it can't control what somebody else is doing.
I heard a great quote this week that sort of, that reminds me of, which is, consistency looks at first to be a lack of consistency. And I think that's a key with what you're talking about. You know, if you ask me to go vegetarian right now, I couldn't do it because I'd slip up. But as we keep doing that can happen. And talking about the sugary drinks, I was so interested in the quotes that you mentioned in the book from Heber J. Grant and Spencer W. Kimball about them. And obviously they said in there that, you know, this isn't a commandment. This is a personal thing. Please avoid those. And I think that's very wise.